The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
To another wonderful edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with former Oshkosh Mayor and City Councilwoman Melanie Bloechl. Every 4 to 6 weeks, we do what's called Another Viewpoint. That means it is our viewpoint and viewers' viewpoints. Our viewpoints are ours. We are entitled to them under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and we will continue to express our views. And that is actually, that's actually where we're going to start tonight. I don't even know how to begin this, Mel. I really don't. We're taping this on the 26th of August. At the City Council meeting 2 nights ago, there was a citizen who got up and during citizen statements talked about a certain cable TV show with crude hosts. Now, he didn't name this show by name, nor did he name us by name, but Mr. Mark Schumerth made the comments, and it was very clear, it could be reasonably inferred from his comments and what he was saying that he was talking about us and this show. So much so reasonably inferred that we've heard from a number of people since that City Council meeting, all callers of support, mind you, and we won't say what the callers have said about the rhetoric that they believe was spun at the council meeting. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to read Mr. Schumerth's statement that he gave during citizen statements, but I'm going to break it down and then we're going to talk about these little sections of his statement. First of all, he prefaced his statement by saying that he doesn't have cable TV, but someone had given him a copy of one of our Another Viewpoints, and that show was done shortly after he had appeared at a council meeting, I believe in July. And he said he was aghast and appalled, evidently, by the show.
Now, is that a direct quote?
Yes, okay. That's a direct quote. All of these coming from Mr. Schumerth are direct quotes. Quote, "The stock and trade of the hosts was to totally and absolutely misquote the people with whom they disagreed and then belittle the misquotes which they themselves had made." Now, I don't know what Mr. Schumerth is trying to say here. I mean, it kind of strikes me as some kind of a riddle. But suffice it to say, I think that far too many people do not understand what a quote is. If we say it's a quote, that means it's a direct quote. That is what the person said verbatim. If it's not a direct quote, then we're paraphrasing what they've said. And, you know, that is not to be intended as a direct quote. They are two different things. And I think before people accuse us or anyone else of misquoting them, it would be highly advisable for them to understand basic terminology of the words that they are throwing around in their commentary. Another quote, "In fact, in the brief viewing I had, there was not one accurate quote. This was accompanied by a liberal dose of character assassination and name-calling. There was absolutely nothing that bore even a vague resemblance to enlightened political discourse." Well, again, we did not say that we were quoting anybody. We were paraphrasing Mr. Schumerth's comments relative to a change of government proposal that had been brought before the city council. And he was up there spouting things off that clearly were inaccurate. And if he had read the proposal as carefully as he says he did, he would not have been making the comments that he was making. They were wrong. They were completely inaccurate, at least some of them that he was saying. He was reaching for things that were going to happen in city government that simply were not being proposed, and that is simply wrong. And as someone who was a member of the group who helped bring forward this legislation, this proposed legislation, and to whom it was important, I personally took offense by anyone, Mr. Schumerth or anyone, getting up there and espousing these inaccuracies as if they are fact.
Well, what it does is it muddies the water.
Yes.
It confuses a constituency that we are trying to inform and educate as to what positions are out there, what the benefits of those positions could or could not be, depending on what perspective that you're coming from. And, you know, in a previous show, Mr. Esslinger said that that is kind of like the standard operating procedure for anyone who does not agree with a change of government. I think Mr. Schumerth had made comments to the effect that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I think that there are a number of people out there who feel it is broke.
Yes.
And it does need some attention, and it does need to be tweaked, and it does need to be given due course and discussion. And if that means public discourse, well, then so be it.
Well, I mean, you know, he was saying that the numbered seats was district representation or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing again, Mr. Schumerth. You know, it clearly wasn't district representation. It absolutely was not, never was intended to be.
Well, what I was kind of confused by is we had a town hall meeting. It was open to the public. Mr. Schumerth was not one of the people in attendance.
No.
I don't recall seeing him at the workshop. Now, he may have been on a camera range, but I didn't see him viewing the workshop at all. So when these three political experts talking about various forms of government throughout the state of Wisconsin and what is being done in other communities of like size and even lesser size and larger sizes as well, that is working, that is creating economic development, that is creating stability in the job markets, that's creating this growth. He wasn't here to hear those things. And I'm a little surprised by someone who would present themselves as an individual in the know. You know, to present himself as somebody that he knows of what he speaks, he knows of what this particular proposal stood for and would bring forward, that could be that far off the mark. And, you know, I've got no problem if people don't like our show, and I have no problem if people don't like us in particular. That's fine, but that certainly doesn't change the fact that muddying the waters is still muddying the waters.
Exactly. Well, you know, I guess I would just reiterate again that Mr. Schumerth apparently, based on his, you know, statement that I had just read, it doesn't seem that he understands the difference between a quote and paraphrasing something. I mean, we stated our feelings, and I went back and I looked at the tape. We stated our feelings on actions that certain city council members had taken and on other things that were going on politically in the city. And, you know, I can't speak to the whole thing because he said that he only saw, you know, a brief segment, a brief viewing, he calls it, quote unquote. And so I don't know what small snippet he saw. But, you know, we're entitled to say how we feel about what our elected officials are doing. That's part of what makes this country of ours the great land that it is that we have the freedom of speech. And I certainly didn't see us calling him names. And moreover, you know, Mr. Schumerth may not believe that there was enlightened political discourse. But, you know, we certainly had a very enlightened conversation on that show. And the better majority of people who watch this show feel not only enlightened but inspired by what they're seeing. And so I guess it comes down to one's definition of enlightened.
And perception, yes.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that Mr. Schumerth does not watch the show. He doesn't like the show.
Well, he doesn't get cable.
Yeah, and that's his right. I mean, after all, this is America, and he can either watch it, not watch it, or, you know, he seems to be getting a copy from his friends, so, you know, maybe they'll give him a copy of this show too, and then he can start a little mini Eye on Oshkosh library. Or he can just simply tell him the show doesn't enlighten him and he'd rather not have it. I mean, you know, our feelings aren't going to be hurt by that. This is the next comment that he made, and it is a quote again. "Slander and libel flowed freely, and it was clear that the hosts of the show have no clue as to the difference in how those terms apply to public figures and private citizens." Now, I don't know from which legal dictionary Mr. Schumerth has gotten his definitions, but I looked in both my legal dictionaries at home last night, and for the record, libel, by the way, can't be committed in a broadcast medium. Libel can only be committed in print form. We don't print a newspaper here. This is a television program, and it's a talk show at that. So libel is non-existent here. Non-existent. Doesn't apply. And to slander someone, a little Law 101 here, to slander someone, you must say something that is not true, and that it must, in most cases, somehow hurt someone's reputation or their standing in the community. None of what we said was untrue. We were stating our opinions, and it certainly hasn't ruined Mr. Schumerth's position in the community. I don't even know what he does. You know, I've never heard of this man, so until he started showing up at a couple council meetings. You know, I mean, really, it would appear that if anyone has slandered anyone, I think it's us who's been slandered by Mr. Schumerth. I mean, by his comments, by his misstatement of fact, various innuendo that he's made on public access television just 2 nights ago on August 24th. And simply because he didn't name the show or the hosts, you know, again, under the law, if it can be reasonably inferred who you're talking about, that can be considered slanderous if it is untrue and damages someone's reputation or standing. And in this case, it was very obvious who he was talking about. Very obvious.
Well, you know, Cheryl, one of the things that I was a little capped off about in these comments is I've never had a problem with anybody telling me if they think I'm a horse's behind or whatever. You have a right to your opinion, and God knows plenty of people have shared it with me over the years, public official, non-public official. They'll come right to your door and tell you. Yeah. But if Mr. Schumerth truly believed that we had done something as heinous as he has described at the August 24th meeting, and using terms, his terms, not mine, libel and slander flowing freely, that we had done something this awful to him personally. What I don't understand is if you believe that strongly that you are making statements like, I think the city manager, the city council, the city attorney should step in and let these people know that this is illegal. If you truly believe that those things have transpired and you feel as though you have been hurt irreparably, why would you do anything but name us? I mean, truly, if I felt as though, you know, Joe Blow had said something that irreparably damaged me, and I really believe that there was a case for slander, I wouldn't care who Joe Blow was or what they did. I'm here to tell you. I'd name names, stand on the rooftops, and I'd tell it, you know, go tell it on the mountain. But this is character assassination in a more cowardly fashion. You just infer and you imply. And the only reason I thought that he was probably talking about us is because we're one of the only cable access shows that have hosts, plural. And
we had named him.
Yes.
You know, I mean, so, and there's no law against that either. You know, there simply isn't. I mean, he got up at a public meeting and made public comments, and we simply were addressing those comments because they were not accurate. You know, shame on us, I guess, for thinking that we had a right to do that. He then went on to say, quote, Since the city is the stakeholder in public access cable, it might be a good idea for the council, the city manager, and the city attorney to make clear to all those involved in public access broadcasting the legal ramifications of slander and libel. Well, again, it's too bad that Mr. Schumerth only saw, as he called it, a brief viewing. Otherwise, he would have seen very clearly that at the beginning of every single show, just as there are at the beginning of every other cable access show on OCAT Channel 2 or OCAT Channel 10, there is a disclaimer that simply says that the opinions expressed are those of the producer or the hosts, not of anyone in the city or OCAT or anything like that. Our opinions aren't even necessarily sometimes shared by our crew, for God's sake, but there are opinions, and we're entitled to them. In addition to that, the particular episode that Mr. Schumerth seemed to let get under his skin here a little bit was called Another Viewpoint, just as this one is. So it was clear to anyone watching that that was strictly a commentary. Those are our opinions, and again, we're entitled to them, as long as we're not saying something that's not true and damaging the man's reputation or anyone else's for that matter. And again, there is not one single shred of proof or validity to Mr. Schumerth's claim that libel and slander were flowing freely. Libel doesn't apply, as I said, and slander, there's nothing to that either. The other thing is, moreover, had we been at the council meeting that night that he spoke, not 2 nights ago, but last month in July, pardon me, when he was making those misstatements, we would have had the right, and I'm sure we would have gotten up and said, this Mr. Schumerth is clearly wrong about what he's talking about. These things simply aren't here in the documents. I mean, it's a 5 or 6 page document. Look at it. Where does it say district representation? We would have gotten up and said that. I feel very certain of that. And, that too is our right. He was making comments that not only were inaccurate, but, as you said, they easily could have and probably would have misled and confused the public. And that simply isn't fair. And there's one other thing here, and this is another quote. The worst part of this is that such programming stifles public discourse. Good citizens with valuable ideas and input could be constrained from speaking out for fear they might be ridiculed and made public spectacle by such crude program hosts.
I've been called worse than that.
One doesn't want to abrogate the right of free speech, but these types of programs clearly remind us that no one has the right to shout fire in a crowded theater. Well, unquote. No public discourse has been stifled. First of all, we rarely comment on things that citizens state at council meetings, unless, of course, they've said something that's really good or they've said something that's really outrageous. And moreover, I think if anything, we've been very helpful and instrumental in getting people in this community talking about what's going on, getting them motivated, getting them fired up and jazzed up about what's going on, getting them angry, or helping. I shouldn't say we're getting them angry. They already are angry, but we're giving them an opportunity to voice their anger, to vent their feelings about things. So people haven't been constrained from talking. I mean, we've actually seen more different faces come to the council meetings since we've been doing this show. And that, too, is a fact. And the other thing is, to compare our stating our opinions on a show, which has full disclaimers, and anyone viewing it even for the first time can see that it is our opinion. I mean, after all, that's what a talk show is, okay? To take that quantum leap then, and to say that we're going to compare it to shouting fire in a crowded theater is absolutely ridiculous. It goes from the sublime to the ridiculous, and it's a stretch no matter how you look at it. You can't compare one to the other. And he concluded by saying, quote, "And slander and libel are against the law." Well, they certainly are. And I think that some people should keep that in mind, because we didn't slander and libel anyone. And I think that when people get up in a public forum like that and make sweeping statements like that,
they open a really big door.
The door is huge.
Well, you know what I think is interesting? I just wanted to take one of these quotes. One of the parts in one of the last statements, the worst part of this is that such programming stifles public discourse. Good citizens with valuable ideas and input could be constrained from speaking out for fear that they might be ridiculed. We have council members who have stepped away from the pack. I think Paul Esslinger is a real good measure of that. Brian Peschel, a very good measure of that. That these two gentlemen have stepped away from the pack, have tried to espouse and pass legislation that is not in keeping with the Fab Five. And I have never seen such public ridicule being allowed on a council dais in my life. And Mr. Schumerth is certainly one that likes to lob rocks as well.
Although public figures are,
well, that's wonderful, but you know,
elected officials rather are at a different level. But
well,
still,
sure. Here's the thing: you're still a good citizen. You're still a human being. The difference between an elected official and the good citizens that stand up to the mic is that the elected officials have put their name on the line to do this every week, every month, every day, to go after every issue, not just the ones that are their neighborhood issues or what have you, but to keep coming and keep showing up and to keep plugging away and to keep trying, you know. And so does that make them less of a good citizen? I mean, does that make them less human? Does that make them less fallible? Or I just find it interesting that there are those who will lob rocks from the cheap seats at elected officials because, well, elected officials, the standard for libel and or slander is so much higher. So they have this safety net. They think they can say whatever they want, do whatever they want to these people because, well, gee whiz, they're elected. They're still your neighbors. They're still moms. They're still dads. They still have standing in the community. They still have families. They still have full-time jobs that they participate in. If you don't think that lobbing rocks from the cheap seats at council members can be every bit as hurtful as you having them lobbed back, you should probably be careful where you're throwing them.
Well, and let's face it, we have lobbed more than our share of rocks. We really have. And, you know, we readily admit that. But I think that those rocks have been justified. We haven't made personal attacks on someone.
Oh, I think I have gone after people more when there is a level of foolishness that I think that when we move from legislative excellence, trying to get the community to move in a positive direction and doing things that involve people participation, voter participation, taxpayer participation, to castrating people and making them feel as though they're insignificant or that their intelligence level doesn't warrant the knowledge that they need to make decisions. When you infer those things, yeah, I'm going to lob rocks. But I think I have earned the right to lob rocks. I served 12 years. I lived it. I worked it. I breathed every ounce of it. I bled that job. And I know what goes on the council dais. I know these people of which I speak because I've worked with every one of them. With the exception of Brian Peschel, I've worked with every single one of these people. Some longer than others. So if I go back and I listen to the likes of Dr. Mark Hayes, who just... Mike Hayes, who just tried to publicly assassinate, character-wise, Mr. Esslinger for his stances. If if his opinions that 6 or 7 council members can decide who is best fit to serve, then as an ex-council member of 12 years, I should be able to go down that list, down that dais, and tell you every single thing. Do you think that that's a fair way to discern? No. It's just my personal opinion. I don't know these people on a personal level. Yeah. I know them on a very limited professional level, and I mean limited. You don't spend time with these people. You're not friends with these people. You don't associate outside the council chambers with these people. At least I never did. Well, you had nothing in common with most of them. Yeah. You know, so I think that when Mr. Schumerth makes a statement that good citizens with valuable ideas and input could be constrained from speaking, he needs to be very careful, because guess what? Good citizens aren't the only ones who feel constrained from speaking. There are council members who have tried to do certain things, and to be publicly humiliated in a personal fashion, not just on the merits of that particular issue, but to publicly attack them personally, serves no useful purpose. And Mark Schumerth is no different. I mean, I can't remember his exact comment, but he inferred that Mr. Esslinger's legislation was it crybaby tactics? No,
it was spoiled child type things, and I don't think he meant just him. I think that he lobbed us in there probably because we were part of the group who was, you know, bringing some of this legislation forward. I mean, let's face it, the piece of legislation that Mr. Esslinger brought forward a month ago that Mr. Schumerth was inspired to get up and speak about, that was the very proposal that Citizens for Responsible Government had been moving forward on direct legislation efforts.
Well, we are citizens, you know.
Exactly. And we do want responsible government. And we don't feel that we have it now. And, you know, whether we'll have it in the future or not, I guess that remains to be seen. But, you know, we, again, and I didn't even intend to spend this much time on it because, frankly, I didn't think it was really, I didn't want to dignify his comments with this much. But it really, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know, we do need to address this.
Well, I don't know that so much dignifying comments as clarifying comments, and always alerting people that when you assert, and again, my gripe here isn't that he thinks we're jerks or that we're rash or we're harsh or rude or crass or whatever words he wants to use, crude. That's fine. I mean, that won't be the first or last time I'll hear that. No. Me more than you, but nonetheless.
I'm starting to get my share from a few people.
And that's okay. I can deal with that because
the majority of people don't feel that way about us.
But I can deal. I'm better with people who have the guts, the courage of their convictions to stand up and say, you know what, I think you're all wet, and here's why. And look me in the eye. The people that I don't have a lot of respect for are people who infer, who insinuate, who imply wrongdoing, won't name names, just lob it out there like a big old dirty sock hanging out there forever, and then not clarify. And to me, that is wrong. That to me is a slander of character. Is if you're going to infer and imply, then evidently it can't be too terribly relevant to your life because you don't have the guts to come out and really say it.
Right. And again, I will just simply, I guess, sum this up by saying, you know, the only reason that Mr. Schumerth's name was even brought up during that first show is because the comments that he was making about the proposed legislation were inaccurate. That is the only reason that he was talked about. Anyone who's a regular viewer of this show or who had watched that show could clearly see that we didn't talk about anybody else who spoke out against the legislation that Mr. Esslinger was proposing and that we obviously fully supported. Nobody else got talked about, but everybody else was pretty much stating things factually.
Or asking questions to clarify things that they weren't sure of.
This was just inaccurate information that could have the potential to be very damaging had this thing gotten on the ballot. Because, you know, when you have people out there spinning things, even if they believe it's true, I'm not saying that it was done maliciously on his part. He obviously, I mean, maybe he just didn't know. But don't, you know, spit out these words as if they are fact and are so when they're clearly not. And then when someone challenges you on it, please don't step forward and say you're being slandered and libeled when that too is not fact.
Amen.
So, moving right along.
Yeah.
Now that we've got that wrapped up, the smoking ban thing is just, it's turned into one of the biggest debacles that I think this city has seen in a very long time. I mean, first it was one of the most contentious city dividing issues that I've seen in my lifetime. And now it's turned into a huge debacle for anyone who's not aware, and I can't imagine that they wouldn't be. But, you know, in a nutshell, first we had a judge put a temporary restraining order on things that enjoined the city from actually, you know, enforcing the ban. Then within a week or two of that, we had the city saying, oops, we goofed. We didn't publicly notice the referendum question 28 days prior to the election. Therefore, the election's null and void. Now we've got Breathe Free Oshkosh, apparently, who filed a lawsuit or intended to file a lawsuit, according to the paper, just 3 days prior to this, intervening in the civil suit between the 27 restaurant owners and the city. This has just become a huge, huge nightmare. And you know, I gotta tell you, if I were Breathe Free Oshkosh or the restaurant owner, both sides have every right to be angry about this.
Sure.
We didn't support Breathe Free Oshkosh's movement. We didn't like their tactics at all about the way they went about this and their unwillingness to bend. But, you know, by God, they, just like the restaurant owners, they jumped through the hoops. They got every one of the signatures that they needed to get this thing on a ballot. They dotted every I, they crossed every T, and they had every reason to believe that this thing was going to be on that ballot. Well, it was on the ballot, but they also had every reason to believe that just as they had done their job properly, that people at City Hall were going to do their job properly, especially since they're the paid professionals. And God bless the people at City Hall, they're human beings. Somebody dropped the ball. And it has created this quagmire that I don't know where it's going to go from here.
Well, I don't think anybody does, including our mayor. I think he was quoted in the paper, and I'm paraphrasing because I said I think he was quoted. Something about they asked him if he had thought about what potential lawsuits could be presenting themselves, and he said no, indeed, he had not thought about them.
Yeah, and that is true. I haven't thought about that, quote unquote, according to the Oshkosh Northwestern from the 14th of August. And, you know, I mean, what a ridiculous comment that is. Coming from a mayor who wants to be a leader, fashions himself a leader, and who has a jurisprudence degree of all things, a law degree, even though he's not a practicing attorney, but he's got his law degree. He's gone to law school. And he hasn't thought about the potential for lawsuits here. Everybody on the street's thinking about it. Everybody was talking about it from the first time that this word of this debacle got out.
Correct.
Everyone seems to have been thinking about it, but certainly not our mayor. And
I think not wanting to think about it and not thinking about it might be two different things.
Yes, absolutely. You know he was thinking about it.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you'd have to be a fool not to be thinking about it. That was the first thing that came out of my mouth is, I wonder who's going to be first in line to file a lawsuit. Now,
will it be Breathe Free or will it be the restaurant?
Well, it looks like it's Breathe Free.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know if I would have called that one that quickly, but of course then I didn't know that they didn't file it on time.
You know, I mean, they again, we didn't support their position or the ban, nor their tactics, but
we also did not. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Warren Kraft, the city attorney, had also stated that because of this mess with the improper posting of this referendum 28 days before it went to vote, that there have been measures taken to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Now, that was never enumerated as to what those measures were to ensure that this couldn't or wouldn't happen again. But wisely, you, in our last segment, had
last week's
asked
show.
Paul Esslinger if he would please check on what those measures would be and get back to us. And I think that's very important. I think everyone in the community has a right to know. I think this also speaks volumes that maybe some of these things the legislature should be working on allowing cities, because this has been talked about from a financial standpoint, that instead of buying these newspaper advertisements for legal notification from the Oshkosh Northwestern, that we be allowed to do it on the internet, that it would save a great deal of money, and that this might speak volumes to why that also should happen, not just the revenue savings, but also from a time constraint standpoint, that it would automatically be posted.
And then too, for those who don't have internet access, post it in public places, like at City Hall. I know they have everything else posted out in the hallways. Post it at the library too.
Sure.
Post it in enough public places so that people, you know, if they don't see it at one place or another, they can at least have access to it. But, you know, think of the money that could be saved.
Well, and that has always been the big gripe, is that, you know, and there's that balancing act again, because the people's right to know, public notices, and offsetting, how do you find the money to make sure that you are notifying everybody? And I mean, let's face it, the legal notices are about this big. You need a magnifying glass half the time to read them. So, you know, do I think that the internet might be a valuable tool? Yeah, I do. Do I think it's a great revenue saving juncture? Yeah, I do. Do I think that there could potentially be problems with people feeling somewhat disenfranchised? Could be.
Well,
but not everybody gets the Northwestern either.
That's what I was just going to say. I think that if you post it in enough places where people go that are, you know, city-owned properties, I don't think you're going to run into that risk, because, okay, so right now there's just a requirement that you have to publish it in the paper that is your designated paper, you know, for that community. Well, that would be the Oshkosh Northwestern here, but look at how many people don't get it. So many people are now reading things online.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get the Los Angeles Times either, but I read a lot of their articles online. I even pay for certain articles that I need or want, you know, for research or whatever, and I don't mind doing that. But why pay for a paper every day if I'm not going to be using it every day?
Right. So that's, I just think that might be, this might open the opportunity to open those discussions yet again.
On another note, we recently had Representative Greg Underheim on the show. I was grateful for him to be here, but it was a disappointing hour. We have never tried to constrain anyone from talking about, you know, giving us lengthy answers to certain questions. But, and I'm not saying any tales out of school here. I told Mr. Underheim this after we taped the show when he asked how I thought it went. I was very frank with him and told him that, like a lot of career politicians, he talked at length on some of these things and ended up talking in circles and not really saying a lot. So you end up kind of losing, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, but you talk enough and in enough circles and about enough things, and people, whether it's us or viewers, whomever, you sort of, you think, now what was the original?
What the hell was the original question?
What was the original question? I mean, it sounds good, all these words spewing forth, but it doesn't necessarily get to the heart of the issue. And that was one of the problems, is that he talked and talked and talked and talked and didn't answer a lot of the questions directly. And we had so many questions for Mr. Underheim, so many. This is, in the 2 years we've been doing this show, we had the most questions for this man. We probably had, I'm going out on a limb here, but I would say I'm pretty accurate with this. I bet you we had more questions for him than we have had for all the other guests combined. It was that voluminous. Hardly get to any of them, and I felt horrible about that. And I had a couple people on the street razz me about it. In fact, at the town hall meeting, you know, a couple people commented to me that they got a kick out of that because they could see that we were trying. They could see that we were trying, but it was just kind of hard. But I don't know. What is your take on the Underheim interview?
Boy, it's very difficult because I ran against Greg, so I know from a political standpoint how he plays the game. I've been privy to the inside track on how this all works. I really hated it. I really hated it because you really didn't talk about substance. You really didn't talk about what was going on. It was a lot of blah, 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 and I've done this and I've done that, and banging yourself on the chest. It wasn't talking about the issues that confront our city now. I hear a lot about talking about statewide issues, you know, how we have to look at this in the big picture. Well, that might be all well and good when you're going and talking to your cronies in the Republican Party and going back to Madison. But I'm here to tell you, as a constituent of the 54th Assembly District and somebody who actually tried to run and get the focus back on the 54th Assembly District, as are all the candidates now. I have to tell you, I'm so impressed with the slate of candidates that we have running for the 54th Assembly District. I was really, really impressed with all of them. But this conversation about how you have to have a bigger view for the state of Wisconsin, well, I'm here to tell you, the 54th is struggling. We are struggling. It's like we're in quicksand, and the only thing that you keep handing us is the shovel. Well, the shovel doesn't do you any good when your head's half under the quicksand. You got nothing to grab onto. Do you know what I'm saying? And I get just absolutely furious. You know, one of the questions that we asked Mr. Underheim was, well, how long have you been on the health care committee, the chair of the health committee? And he said, since 1994. Okay. So why aren't we doing something to improve the health care in our area? And we went into a diatribe about health savings accounts.
Yes.
And how this was going to save us all. And I'm here to tell you, I got so many phone calls about that health savings account, those comments, and how out of touch they are with what's going on here. Health savings accounts work really swell if you're employed.
And you're in a plan that is a qualifying plan.
Yes.
It's not just enough to be employed.
Yes. And also the comments about, when you brought up about socialized medicine, which, oh my goodness, you would have thought that, you know, you were talking about Marxism or something.
The plague or something.
Yes. And how that was like the worst thing since sliced bread. And I am actually in the process of tracking down an article from the Public Citizen, which is a newspaper that is not for profit. It is a research paper on health and issues of concern to people in the United States. And it deals predominantly with health-related issues. And
may I just interject one
Sure,
thing?
sure.
That Public Citizen publication that Mel is referring to, we have a link for it on our website. We have a number of links on the website, and it's continuing to grow. And if you're, when you go to the website, on the left-hand side, you'll see something that says links. That just tells you if there's new links that have been added in the last maybe 24 or 48 hours or whatever. If you're looking for the links themselves, you go up to the top of the page where it says Web Resources, and you click on that, and that will open up an entire page that gives an explanation. It's actually a little description of what each link is, and from there you can click directly on the link and it'll take you to it. So
right.
Anyway.
Well, and I'm glad that you explained that, because you and I had talked about that, because in reading some of these articles in the Public Citizen, they're wonderfully done. And there's no political agenda to any of this stuff. It's all pure research, pure comments from experts, clean reporting, no special yellow journalism on one side or the other. But Greg, while he was here on our show talking, when you had brought up the issue of socialized medicine and why we are not supplying health care to every single solitary Wisconsinite that needs it, working, not working, single, married, children, what have you. His comment was that socialized medicine does not work, and Canada is a real good example. Well, it was very interesting because in the Public Citizen there is an article. I'm not sure if it's actually in the newsletter or if it's actually in the newspaper. They have two different publications. Where there was a Canadian physician that actually came to the United States for a year and a half, and worked within our healthcare system, actually came from Canada and worked here with our American physicians. And he literally wrote, he said he couldn't believe how screwed up our system was, and he couldn't understand why it was so goofed up. And one of his questions was, and this is what's really intrigued me, this Canadian physician said, I don't understand why in the United States of America you will spend $1.6 trillion a year on health care for only those who can afford to pay the premium, and why American citizens connotate health care with employment.
Yeah.
And that why you do not demand as a human life issue that health care be provided.
Well, you know, one of the things that Greg Underheim had said was that he hopes that it never becomes, you know, national health care, socialized medicine, whatever. And
run by the government.
Yeah, and then he did talk about Canada. And he was saying how there you're basically on some kind of a waiting list for certain procedures, whether it's a knee replacement or a hip replacement.
And points and...
Yeah, yeah. They assign points, and basically it's a priority system. Well, I mean, that in essence is what we have now. I mean, have you tried to get an appointment for an annual checkup? We're talking anywhere from 4 to 6 months minimum to make an appointment, okay? And if you have an emergency situation, they'll get you in. I mean, that's pretty much how we do things already for the most part. I mean, how else can you do it? But you take those situations that are most critical, those situations that are most life-threatening. That's the only fair way to do it.
Well, my concern was that, Greg, when I asked the question, what, in your professional opinion, are driving health care costs? And what is going to stabilize healthcare costs? He truly believes health savings accounts are going to stabilize healthcare costs. It is not.
No, no.
It is not. What it's going to do is it's going to set up an account so that people can only afford just so much healthcare. And people will do without certain healthcare. People will not go for MRIs or CTs or mammograms because they'll have to allocate certain dollars, and if you have children, you are going to make sure that your children get that health care first. I think one of the saddest things, and I wish that we had known about this when we did have Greg on the show, I was in COPS, and a lady came up to me and she was telling me about the fact that the Rockwell retirees just received a letter, I want to say a couple weeks ago, telling them that they're not going to have their health care benefits anymore. Now, this is not, I'm not talking about Axel Tech, I'm not talking about Arvin Marriage, I'm talking, we're going all the way back to the Rockwell retirees and coming forward. That they're going to, and this woman was a widow of a former Rockwell employee, and their health care is going to drastically change. Now, why are we not talking about these things? Why are we not fighting for our citizens here in the 54th Assembly District? If this is going on elsewhere in the state of Wisconsin, then our Republican representatives should be on their tippy toes screaming at the top of the mountain instead of talking about ridiculous things that they're dealing with right now. They're not talking about these things because they don't know how to fix them. And Greg even said, I'm not going to fix the problems with health care. The governor's not going to fix them.
The president's
not going to fix them.
President-elect isn't going to.
Well, who does Sam Howell do we look to then? Is it going to take private citizens like us who literally come out and revolt and say, we will not tolerate not being able to provide health care for our families?
Well, that's one of the points that he was making when it came to local fees and things like that. He said, you know, the local government won't continue putting fees in place if the citizens won't allow them to do it. And he's right, but it takes everybody collectively to stand up. Just a few of us can't do it by ourselves. And that's kind of what you had mentioned when in last week's show when we had Paul Esslinger on, you know, talking about the disappointment that I think we all felt by the lack of involvement and the apathy by a lot of the citizens. You know, we hear it all the time. I mean, I'm shifting gears here a little bit, but it all kind of ties in. You know, we get so many phone calls from people, and so many people stop us on the street, in the stores, you know, wherever.
We go to lunch.
Yeah. And they tell us what a great job we're doing, how much they love the show, how much they learn from the show, and, you know, you girls keep on fighting the good fight. And, you know, we appreciate that more than I think you'll ever know.
Yeah.
We love hearing it. And we thank you for that, and please don't stop. I mean, if that's how you feel, you know, keep going. But bottom line, I guess, is, you know, if we're ever going to effectively bring about any kind of change, whether it's in local government, whether it's state government, or even federal, but more specifically on a local and state type level, we need more people to step up to the plate. You don't have to walk the full mile with us. Just, you know, a few steps. Take a few steps. More people should have been at that town hall meeting. Yeah. More people should come to council meetings, and if they can't get to them, you know, I'm one of those people. I cover politics in another community. So typically on the nights when there are council meetings here, I'm covering a council meeting in another city, or a school board meeting, or what have you, always in another city though. And so I can't always get to our council meetings, but I speak out here on the show, I speak out on the website, and if I'm really motivated about something, I'll write to folks and I'll let them know, because that may be, or I'll call, that may be the only way that I have to communicate with them, since I can't hardly ever make it to the meetings. But folks, we need more help. We just simply can't do it all alone.
Well, and you can imagine, as frustrated as you and I were, and we're just, you know, Joe Blow citizen. I can't even tell you, as a person who's been an elected official, how Mr. Esslinger and how Mr. Peschel feel up there. They're taking your phone calls, they're taking what you tell them, and they're really running with it. I mean, you have no idea how far they've stuck their necks out. And then when push kind of comes to shove, the only people that are coming forward are the people who want to, like, tar and feather them and just pound the living tar out of them.
And again, like we've talked about on a different show, many citizens will come to council meetings and complain about certain things, but it's amazing. I mean, we had a lot of help with the petition drive. We really did.
They were wonderful.
And they were wonderful, and we would have been able to knock that thing out of the ballpark had we not stopped it, to do the town hall meeting, for Paul to do the workshop and that kind of thing. But, you know, here again, some of the people were disappointments to us, because, you know, they said things like, well, you know, we're afraid to put a name on a petition or to circulate petitions because, you know, we got to deal with so-and-so down at City Hall. But yet they'll come up to a council meeting where they have to, in many cases, face the person eyeball to eyeball, and they'll give their name and address for the record and go at it hammer and tong up there, saying how lousy things are. I don't understand the logic in that, but, you know, we need people to help. We need people to help. We're down to just a few minutes. I can't.
You're kidding.
No. They
really?
Just gave me the 5-minute signal here.
I thought you were going to say something else, but no, go ahead.
No. I just want to mention something good. The Lions. You know, there's crew
Mary-
members are just happy about this.
Yay, lions! Pretty lions.
There have been 33 lions that for the last several weeks have been in and around Oshkosh, all fashioned after Harris, one of our lions at the library, and they've been decorated by a number of people. Just got a press release yesterday. 5 lions in the project to support Oshkosh Arts have been named outstanding by the director of the John Michael Kohler Arts Center in Sheboygan. It did include all 33 lions in the Pride of Oshkosh exhibit. And these lions, by the way, are the creator of the winning lions is going to get a $1,000 reward. Their lions will be auctioned off, as will the other lions as well. But the 5 outstanding lions, I don't know where some of these lions are. I mean, the one is pretty, I think the one we can pretty much figure out. But Poodle Envy, Oshkosh Gothic, the King of the Midway, Fur, Fin, and Feather, and Walking on the Wild Side. Well, that's only 4. Where's the 5th one here? I thought that one called the Paperboy was in there, but I don't know. Well, anyway, I'm going to put this on the website. The press release will be on the website, so check it out on there. But you know, congratulations to all the winners. And you know, that bothers me that there's only 4 listed here that I can see. That bothers me. Yeah. Oh, I was just informed by a crew member that one artist did 2. So, and I guess that's what it is. It's Fur, Fin, and Feather, and Walking on the Wild Side. That's what it is. I thought it was all 1. So, thank you, Mary Helen. I appreciate that.
She's also the one who's going, yay, lions!
Yeah, she loves that.
Loves the lions.
So, congratulations to all the winners, and really to all the artists. I mean, the lions are fantastic. They're wonderful, and it's a good thing. And what really makes it special is the fact that, you know, there's no taxpayer dollars that have been involved in this effort. So that makes it even more delightful.
Those are the most special kind.
But I think they've added some you know, interesting conversation to the city, and I see people looking at them everywhere I go.
Yeah, they snap my head around every once in a while.
Closing thoughts.
How's your day?
My day's just been swell, thanks.
Can you believe this weather?
Well,
closing thoughts. She catches me with these. I'm supposed to come up with something really intellectual.
Again, you know, we didn't mean to beat this, you know, libel and slander thing to death here, but it was an important topic. We take it seriously. We're not up here to slander and malign anyone's character. We just believe in people being accurate when they talk about things.
Well, and I think that, you know, especially when we've worked as hard as we have to be a source of information, and while Another Viewpoint is just that, it's another viewpoint, we have always welcomed other people's viewpoints. And if there are people who disagree with us who would like to be on the show, there's nothing we like better than an good old-fashioned coffee warmer-upper.
We can have a debate.
Absolutely.
And Melanie had tried to, on behalf of the show, call Mr. Schumerth. He's been unavailable, couldn't reach him, so she says she'll continue to try. So, but we're only going to try so many times. Anyway, we're out of time, so thanks very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you welcome us into your homes, and we'll see you next time. For Melanie Bloechl, I'm Cheryl Hentz. Until we'll see you next time, take good care, and in the meantime, keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.